the cloud. I'm gonna go to my computer to be safe.
Yeah,
It's recording.
Ready to start. Mike, can you hear us okay, Mike?
Let me go get Ryan.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
How do we push God it?
I can hear you.
Mike, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, since we're recording, I'm gonna put it on mute as long as we, why don't you say something? I'm not very heard.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, we need to turn our volume up. Try it again.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3.
That's not any better. I think I hear you. There's just not picking it up on our sound system here. Turn it up. Maybe it's the TV remote. Oh yeah, it was on 0. Okay, now you're probably gonna blast us out. Say something.
Hello, hello, hello.
Uh-oh, keep going.
Hello, hello, hello.
No. You're not muted, right?
Maybe there's something on my end.
Yeah, let's turn it all the way up on here.
I haven't tried yet, but I'll have problems.
The other one is. So it's kind of hard. So some do very well.
Brian worked here. I keep getting internet for security.
Well, my page I was sending is markings on that frustrated. You can. Oh.
Yeah, let me go.
Try to hear the rest of the conversation.
Representative Ballard, who is our co-chair and we're going to meet today. She's running about 15 minutes late, and she asked me to go ahead and get started. Just seeing who we've got on the internet. So a quorum would be 6 of us.
What was your name?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and who's online? 6. Carrie Cochran. Carrie, you're there, right? 7. So it looks like we got a quorum. Okay. Welcome everybody. Senator McKell is traveling today and unable to be with us, so he is excused, and we'll miss him. And I'm sure he'll be riveted to the recording that will be when he gets the opportunity. And we also excused Dan Powers, who was ill. And Chris, you need to leave before, right?
Yeah, a little before to make it happen.
Okay. And so for everybody's awareness, we've all begun a new 2-year term of office per the statute. So everybody has been reappointed. We have a new student member, thanks to Governor Cox, Matt Molman. And he's our former student that was appointed by the governor. He's replacing Roxana Molina, who was in that capacity before. But Matt, you want to just, I think I'm going to wait for Representative Ballard to maybe introduce herself a little bit so she could be part of it. I think she would like to do that. We'd also like to welcome Michelle. Am I saying your name right? At Uinta Basin Technical College.
Yes, that's correct.
It is Michelle, I know her.
Okay, hi, Michelle. Stephanie confirmed the pronunciation here, so sorry about that. Michelle is replacing Mark Dawkins, who is retired from Uinta Basin Tech and serves as the non-voting representative from our provider in Duchesne County. So, Michelle, anything you want to say hello? And I think your sound's not working or something, right? But there's a chat going on there.
Can you hear me now?
Wait,
Sounds like there's a volume issue.
I don't, yeah, there's no chat. I don't see.
It seems like I heard you faintly. Anyway, welcome, and just some others that are here for the first time that are attending the meeting today. We appreciate all of you being here. Welcome, Ryan. I forgot your last name. Hogan, that's right. I think we've met Ryan on the Zoom or something like that. Have you been in the room? Yeah.
First time in the room.
Okay, all right. Welcome, Ryan. Ryan is a former student. Well, I guess you've been a student since you've been out. So
Yeah.
and welcome. Pardon me. Welcome also to President Brush, Aaron Brush, from Davis Technical College. Are you representing?
I am not representing Dan.
You're representing
It was a
yourself.
coincidence. I was planning on being here before Dan is
Okay.
pretty sick.
Yeah, we're aware of that. So appreciate you being here. And I think we've covered all the newcomers. Just check a message that just came in from somebody that typically participates. Okay, the Zoom link on the agenda is not working. Can you please share again? Okay. Raise your hand on Zoom if or virtually or whatever. If you were able to access from the link in the agenda.
I accessed from the link.
You did it from the link, not from the appointment on the calendar. Okay.
Oh, no, it was linked in the calendar.
So Annie, did you get in from the agenda?
Oh, actually, it may have just been the calendar link, sorry.
I think he said yes. Our sound is not working on this end. We'll work on that.
Can we hear anybody that's online?
I can hear some faint sounds when they talk, but I don't know where it's coming from or how to turn it up. Okay. All right, I'm not sure how to respond to that, so but we need to continue on. So just a reminder today to speak up for those who are joining us online, those of you that are in the room, so that the microphones can pick us up, as well as for the recording of the meeting. Speakers on.
Because can you hear your vibration when you speak?
My vibration.
I'm hearing a little bit of sound over here.
Yeah. We need a volunteer on Zoom to read a sentence or tell us a joke or something so we can figure out our sound.
Hello, this is Mike Medley from Snow College.
Yeah, I can hear something. Keep talking.
I can tell it's coming out of these speakers, or that's.
Mike
I
Medley
think
from
it's
Snow
supposed to
College.
come out of the speaker, and we're not getting any sound out of here. I'm gonna step out. I've got it recording, and I'm gonna go get Ryan to look at this.
All right. So the first item on our agenda, item number 2, is the approval of the minutes for the June 20th meeting. And you should have received that in your agenda materials. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, but we have a motion to approve those. Did I see a head nod?
Yes,
All
I
right.
motion to approve previous agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second, thank you.
David Block, a voice second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved. We're going to spend a little time reviewing our higher education programming plan. I'm going to hijack, what is this? 3 out of 4 meetings we have, technical problems. So I'm going to try to hijack, oh, there's Lorene, for the presentation.
Let me go over and check that speaker. I don't think it's working. Okay,
Look
what
at
is?
this button.
I'm gonna let him do that.
You're welcome. Senator Ballard.
No, we're not hearing anything on the speaker, but you can hear a little vibration coming up through here.
We just finished approving the minutes.
Perfect.
I think we want to go back to this item right here. Invite Matthew, who recognizes him.
Well, they are right now.
Okay, sorry for taking just a few minutes. I was delayed with another meeting. I'd like to welcome Matthew Holman. You are a former student that's here, that's been appointed by the governor to be here with us, and we hope that your insight can help to give us some direction that would be meaningful.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Everyone else who is here in our council is appointed to a second term, so I guess we didn't get enough done the first time. We got to do it again. Yes, so we need all of you. Oh, you already did? Okay, great.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
Okay, no, I think that's it. So let's go ahead to item number 3 on the agenda. We have higher education programming plan. Jared has some slides to summarize USH's recommendation for higher education programming, pathways, and enrollment. And this is a big deal as we talk about the classes that are offered in the major correctional facilities, both in person and online, as well as how we're working on expanding those pathways into our jails. So let's go ahead and we'll turn it over to Jared.
Chair Ballard. So since we're having technical difficulties, I'm going to bail on Maureen to bring up my slides here. So we were asked by the chairs, and some of you were interested in participating in this request as well, to work with the institutions and our Office of Higher Education and develop some recommendations for what are the pathways that are in place or need to be in place for our incarcerated in our state facilities. So we have spent some time. I met with representatives, I think, of each of the institutions that are in the room here today, and have also had conversations with our team here at the Commissioner's Office representing the system, and have developed some recommendations for us to discuss and consider and get some good feedback on. And or let's have a program where they can access it. So locate and keep students with their program. Number 2 is to extend virtually if it's feasible and necessary. So if we have a student who has to be at this other location and they are in a program where it's feasible to extend that program with technology, and that isn't something that we would want to pursue and consider. Issues there on both sides, the institution sides and institution side and the correction side. For corrections, you would have to deal with issues of technology and security. How do we have that electronic access if possible? And the institutions issue, like anytime you're doing remote access to your courses, is how do you design the curriculum? No way to do that. Let's do it. Yeah, okay. We'll move quickly because you've all had a chance to look at this. And when we consider adding physical locations, our recommendation is let's strengthen our anchoring locations before duplicating. Let's not duplicate a program out here in another facility or another part of the state if we haven't got a strong program where we are. But also consider, is there a sustainable cohort or an institution at these other locations and resources to put a program in, then it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to do a duplication there. So yeah, if we go to number 5, looks like you got it. Thank you. Congratulations.
Must have done something.
Number 5 has a cool visual on it. Well, it's that cool. So now we get to programming for students. How do we guide students in the education that they participate in? And you'll see on the left that these are sort of, that's the filter icon, right? It might not be 100% the best metaphor to use, but I'd like to suggest that we think about this as a filtering, not of, well, you didn't make this cut, so let's go this way. You didn't make it this cut, let's go this way. I would like to see it as we are trying to get the right person or the student in the right place for their situation. And the way we do that is we start with number 1 and see, does this fit your situation? If it doesn't, let's go to number 2. And that's not to say that we can't jump to pieces of 3 and 4. So if we go to the next slide, we start with high school completion. The first priority would be to get them through high school. And thank you, Stephanie, for just taking care of all that for us throughout the state and your school districts. But we would recommend that they have their high school completion before they start their post-secondary program. In many cases, it's required as part of your program or your accreditation or your admission standards to have completed high school. In some cases, you can do that concurrently. There are some programs, we see this in high school, current enrollment, taking a high school class while they're teaching a college class. And so there might be some cases where they can do that. And there are some that you don't even have to have high school experience with Rush if you're that involved with the details of some of those technical programs. But there might be some of those. I believe most of them do require high school, but there might be a program or two that get started. So that's the high school piece. We also need to think about remediation even for those that have completed. So from there, let's go to the post-secondary piece. And the recommendation is let's start with what we have available that will get those who fit into these kinds of programs and occupations. Let's get them into those programs. So we start with our technical education certificate. They're in generally a shorter amount of time. We hope that within 3 years and sometimes even 1 year, depending on the program and their schedule and access, that they can complete a program by the time they're released, and they'll have current skills to take for employment by the time they finish there. But this would, one of the questions is, do you have the interest and aptitude for this program? If not, you move to the next thing. And we have a list of current programs. So let's go to the next filter. So in the case of the student, they got their high school diploma. These programs aren't up their alley or appropriate for the student. So let's look at some other alternatives. Let's look at some general education and associate degrees. Let's give some priority to articulated certificates for students that are in a certificate program, and they have some general education and complete a certificate. Or let's take them to a general education certificate. That's something they can finish in a shorter amount of time, and they can take it with them almost anywhere, either while they're in or when they can take it, right, or whenever it's released. So we talked a little bit about some of those. So let's go to number 4, the bachelor's degrees. On this, we would consider students who have completed an associate's degree for the lower division that would be provided in the facility with a community college that gives them access to community college tuition and the pedagogical approaches. Based on their occupational interest and the admission requirements. So that's kind of the outline, and if we go to the last slide, there is the summary of how we might recommend routing students there. And with that, I think if the chair allows it, I think we might take 5 or 10 minutes beyond our designated time to see if you have some discussion or feedback on what we can do. I think what we'd like to do, whether it's today or in our final report, which will be at the next meeting, is come to a place where, and maybe we're there now, maybe we're not, come to a place where we can say, this is what this council recommends. And those recommendations to corrections and to higher education to help guide students and guide their deployment programs.
Okay, I
How
want
much
to
time
make,
are we gonna take?
I want to make a couple comments and then kind of have some questions or other comments to open up, just been clarifying a few things. So I was just clarifying with both Brian and Andrea, that pretty quickly when somebody comes in, you know immediately if they had their high school diploma or not. If they're in state, or you know pretty quickly if they're not literate that you need to do some intervention pretty fast. Is that right?
As soon as they meet with their case manager, which is pretty soon.
Usually within about a month, maybe, or something.
Usually, yes. You should hopefully sooner than that.
I mean, we try to get the caps done within the first 30 days, which would include an assessment for literacy.
And right now, because the gauge of knowing where everybody is in their academic pathway, there hasn't really been that evaluation thoroughly done. So you're in the process right now of testing 15 to 20, 35, something like that, inmates a day. So it will probably take a year to really know where all the inmates are who are currently in there. Got that right?
I haven't done the math for every.
Something like that.
About that.
And, but after that, of actually knowing where everybody is. When an inmate comes in, part of my question that I want to have clarified is the pathway right now for them to do education is somewhat limited. We're trying to open that up. How available is it really if somebody said, while I'm doing programming, I also want to do education, like starting next month? How possible is that to do it at the same time? What are the barriers, and really what's the reality of it right now versus where you want to be?
Right now, anybody who wants to do that, so I would say be enrolled in multiple opportunities, the programming classes and education classes, and even the work, the opportunity is there. It's just a matter of managing the schedules. So I may be able to get a job with UCI, say, but I also need a high school diploma. It's just a matter of UCI allowing me to miss a day or two to be able to go to high school at the same time, and then me allow most of our post-secondary classes, at least for Salt Lake Community College, are done in the evenings. So that usually doesn't interfere with jobs or programming. Vocational schools though, Davis Technical College are almost all done during the day. So that's difficult to manage a schedule of working and doing technical college. So there's nothing prohibiting it except the physical feasibility of it.
Okay, so what I've been trying to get at for the last few months, that I have an urgency at this point. I wanna know the classes that you have, what's the physical location opportunity, what are you currently offering, what is your wish list, what is the time that's needed in class, out of class, what is the time that is only in class versus only online. I want logistics. I want the pathways that you already have set up and what those classroom barriers are. So that's one thing, right? From the institutions, I want to know specifically, where are we, what is available, and what could you do with what we have right now, okay? The pathways, I think we've got a pretty good list right now of what the options are currently. I want, I think, and I've also seen from, I think, both of your institutions, what classes and programs you think you could offer. But in my conversations that I've had with corrections, they are not sure how to implement more unless they have logistics. So I think, am I correct in that? They're not quite sure what you need from them. Physically, the in-class time, out-of-class time, where you really want to go. Am I accurate in that, or correct me, educate the process, and what is it that you really need from the institutions right now to offer more to the inmates?
So I think logistics are a huge barrier, right? Because there's competing demand for students, and we can't require anyone to engage in their own education.
Right.
We can only give them that opportunity and open the door and encourage them, right? So there's that piece. Sometimes recently we've noticed that people will opt out of their educational opportunity for the preference of better housing, what they perceive to be better housing. So there's sometimes those barriers too, right? Where people are just not motivated to educate. I know that classroom space is a premium, so especially for the women, not so much for the men, but that's going to be a challenge that we're working on figuring out and actively kind of having conversations around. I would also say that just having enough staff to do, not just to teach the classes, right? We've been on a hiring freeze for a while, but we're trying to get rid of that gridlock, start hiring some teachers to help support more educational opportunities, right? So we haven't had enough staff to support the education. So that's on our end, right? Like, I'm just taking on responsibility for the pieces that we haven't been able to motivate and figure out, but are getting there. I think that we have a contract with Davis and with other institutions, and so their contract has to do with the amount of money that we pay them and how many classes they can possibly deliver given that amount, right? So that's the other constraint, is we use our surcharge account to pay for our education. So depending on how much is in that account will highlight how much we can provide, right? If we can offer another class or another contract. Just to kind of give you a sort of, that was a big global answer, but I'm happy to get into the detail too.
Yes. Just a question, because you mentioned about how you can't force them, but I mean, does the policy change? Because when I was there, high school was a requirement to be able to get your lockdown. So it's higher education no longer is, once you get your high school diploma or GED, are you no longer required to do, is that not part of the policy? I mean, it never was to go past that, but high school was a requirement. Like if you don't get high school, then you can't get your lockdown levels increased. Is that no longer policy?
Programming is always voluntary. So, but I will add though, there's a lot of incentives, right? So getting high school completed, or like from the board's perspective, if we are getting people through a certification degree, there's a time cut that comes with that. So there's plenty of inducement to do education. I'm just saying, can't make them. Go ahead.
No, I was in Draper.
Were you in Central?
I was in Draper.
Because like for a while in medicine, in practice, it was.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, in
required.
practice, it was required, like you couldn't
There
credit
is,
to have.
in central Utah,
But
there's
it's,
more of that in practice, but not, I'm not
But
aware
it's
of the
not-
policy.
even here, yeah, it's still more stringent maybe than Salt Lake now, but it's not required the same way that it was.
Is there an element of this where this, I mean, the way you put this together, Jerry, is pretty, I think, a solid way of explaining like avenues and pathways. Can that be part of the meeting with case managers?
It is,
Right.
yeah, that's part
Understanding
of,
access to what resources or pathways.
correct, so that's a huge part of building a case action plan is we say, hey, here's your prison time, right? And we wanna make good use of your time and here's the variety of options, but we're really gonna go off of your LSR and our scores. We're gonna say, what are your core communogenic risk factors? Education happens to be one of them. It's not a barrier, however, like say you're not at high need for education, that doesn't mean we won't offer it to you. So we're still gonna
We're
say,
certainly prioritizing, you know.
Right,
Like
right.
anger management might be because of violence or other.
correct.
Right, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the kind of factors that drives a lot of this is are they literate? Do they have basic literacy skills? Because if they haven't met that really important hurdle, everything else is gonna be sort of lost, right? So we're trying to push to make sure that comes in front of everything else.
So before I hear from the institutions, you know, part of me is thinking if you can take the time to help a new inmate become literate at the same time as programming, why can't you offer the education at the same time as other programming? And I don't necessarily want to get stuck on where we are right now. I'm thinking about if we had a clean slate, how would you do this? Because right now I feel like we have that opportunity, right? So I want to know what can we do, and then let's create the pathways to get there. Because I know like Gunnison is really limited, super limited, but why does it have to be if we can provide some online classes? And why does it have to be that way? So I'd like to hear from both of the main institutions that are already providing it. Where do you see the most, how can we get to where we want to be? And you talk about needing to hire teachers. Well, I think that's what I've been talking with your new director about, to say we have teachers. Your staff don't necessarily have to be the teachers of everything.
Yeah.
We need to be turning it over where we can. We need to be providing online options where we can, rather than putting more burden on your staff when we need your staff to be doing other physical location things, right? And so, do you have any thoughts about where we are and how we can really move this forward a lot faster than we are right now?
If you answer this correctly. Well, this will be timed out by a number that we won't have to take.
You know what, I was gonna say that I would, let's,
We might
with
as
all
well.
due respect, maybe we'll hold off on the specifics until we get there. But I would like to circle back in terms of what I have observed with the high school experience. The policy states, this has been explained to us, that it's not mandatory for inmates to go to high school. I don't think the message is being received by them. I think our experience has been that we talk to many individuals who claim adamantly to have completed their high school diploma and want to come into Salt Lake Community College, for example, and yet they're being forced to take high school once again. I don't know all the reasons why that transpires. I am confident that Andrea is absolutely correct. It's primarily a staffing issue. That is a huge, that's that intake for the case managers to get all of that information, to provide all of that. That's a massive amount. And, you know, they're really, with the lack of support, I guess, in that sense, and the lack of incentive to really go track down, and the means to track down information often about the high school diploma and where these students claim to have gotten it from. And if it's not entered in there into the case management practice, then there's lots of challenges that they face. So we see that a lot in terms, and of course, money is given to the high school based upon enrollment. So I'm not claiming that these are wonderful individuals doing a great job. I'm just saying that without the resources and without a financial incentive to do so, there are a lot of individuals, I fear, that are feeling pressured to take high school a second time, or perhaps even a third time.
We have met offenders who have taken high school 3 times before they finally got it documented and were able to sign up for classes.
So I just felt like we should have that. That is a challenge. We discussed it with Brian. I don't want to, I feel like I'm pointing fingers because the men and women that I work with there that are doing the case management and doing everything are doing a super heroic job with the resources that are there. That is just the reality of it. But we see a lot of what we're talking about.
So it may be somewhat of an electronic data thing, or is it competency, or?
Can I
Yeah, go
interject
ahead.
maybe?
Mhm.
So I mean, there are a couple of complexities, and even those who are not incarcerated, still, I would guess, I don't have data for this, but I would guess that there's a higher percentage of students who have received a GED who are inside the walls than outside in the community. Even those who are not incarcerated, still, if the GED is older, there's a transfer. This is before my time, it's not my fault, I promise, but there was a transfer of data, right? When it went from paper to digital, when everything was digitalized, and there are just a lot, right? Like this happens all the time that people are like, Stephanie, I need a copy of my GED, and I'm like, I find you in the database, I don't know what to tell you, go take it again, right? So there's that issue. It's just for whatever reason, the documentation of that high school diploma or GED is just not there. That's one issue.
How many are Utah students and how many are out-of-state students that have that issue?
I'm told that Utah actually has a higher problem with finding old GEDs than other states. Again, this is not my issue. I just deal with it on a daily basis. I don't know what happened in that transfer. I'm just told that there's an issue and I see it.
Is that from stated from or based from the Utah Board of Education? Or is it from
back in the days?
Record of that?
Back in the days, right, like there were individual testing centers that were doing paper, pencil, and they housed those records, right? And then when it, in 2014, when it all went digital, those were sent to the State Board of Education and then given to GED.
Well, when are you leaving?
What happened is that not all of those were actually sent, or somewhere in the transfer, they were lost. You know, I don't know exactly, I just know they're not there, right? And so when students call, that's an issue. So that's one issue. The other issue is that many, like for instance, Clark County, to get a high school diploma, verification of a high school diploma, right, from Clark County, which several incarcerated students come from, you have to pay, and our programs don't have money, and our students don't have money. And so trying to like access that transcript is sometimes difficult just because of the funding issue, right? It's all digitized, and so there's this complicated process. Other times, students will swear, I got a high school diploma, but I don't even remember which school I went to, right? Like, well, we can't comb every school in the state and the country, right? Like, I don't know what to tell you. So there's like a lot of complexities there. And sometimes, and we did used to be funded by enrollment, we're not anymore. And that did incentivize programs to re-enroll. Sometimes there were not nice practices that were because of that funding. We don't do it that way anymore.
I think I put it a little bit more positive than saying that they were trying to get funded. I didn't want to be on the record as accusing that. I just, there wasn't a financial incentive to track that down. I think it's a solvable problem, though I bring it up to the council. I really do, and I think we're on the right track. What I would like to see is I'd like to see our institution collaborate more effectively with corrections, because Salt Lake Community College at an administrative level has an ability to track down information such as that and help facilitate and provide that. And then what would happen, then we won't have to send a student back to high school, again, who doesn't need that, but instead we'll take them right into the college.
Can we shake on it right now? Because that sounds fantastic.
That's what I want. I think that's a big solution, is to collaborate and have that happen. And so although raising the challenge, I don't want to come out.
Is there a process in place where someone says, I did high school 3 times, I can prove it with the GED exam? Like, is that not?
If they have a GED, they do not need to take high school.
Well, what I'm saying is, if someone's saying, because to me, the other issue at hand is, I know a lot of people that have completed high school that probably should have done it again before going into higher education. And I say that.
No, we don't.
Right, so the idea is, if you're not ready, maybe you need to be taking the GED exam or doing GED prep or something like that, or some kind of remedial course. Or at the end of the day, you can always prove that you did high school by taking the GED exam.
And that is offered on our tablets, the GED.
For GED prep, we are in the process of getting our Salt Lake facility certified as a GED testing site, which we are not.
Because that would be
It's a more complicated process than you would think.
So, and I think that's where part of the barriers are, right? We don't even know what the barriers are unless you bring them up. We don't know if there's a financial barrier to getting the records or a better facility. So I think that's part of why we have this council to say, but that's where we need, the more we can have you identify what are barriers, we could even through other means start working on that punch list of, oh, let's connect this and this, what else is on there, so that we can really utilize our time. President Rush?
Well, that caught my attention, becoming a GED testing site would be a major step forward if we can execute on that. That's not what I was going to comment on your capacity question. So I think of that in terms of 3 legs of the stool. I'm looking at a capacity report that is in real time for all of our programs, that includes corrections. Think about instructional capacity. So do we have enough instructors? Right now, we're well suited for instructors at corrections. That's not our limiter. Think about physical space. Physical space is a limitation. Andrea talked about that. We'll expand with Salt Lake Community College's permission. We'll add an HVAC program, and that will take up the last classroom that was recently volunteered by corrections and executive director Red. So that will occupy the space that we have available in the area that we toured the other day. So that will add that 10th program. So what's the 3rd capacity issue? That's the internet access, right? So we're limited in physical capacity. I don't know what we can do about that. That's way beyond me. If in my perfect world, we'd have an education building, and we'd have flexible classrooms, and we'd have internet, and we'd kill it in terms of all of everything we're talking about. In the space we currently have, that's what we have. In some of these classrooms, I'll tell you right now, look at Automation Box. That's one of the new programs we looked at the other day, right? The capacity of that room, remember how tight it was in there? The capacity of that room was 8 students at a given time. So that gives you some context. Of course, we've got the labs where we teach welding, where we put HVAC. We'll need that classroom for the academic portion, but we can move the HVAC equipment into the lab. So that's the physical capacity world. Now, our students have got the tablets, and they've maxed out the tablets, that 3rd leg of the stool, right, in terms of capacity. Davis Tech is moving into a hybrid environment. We're the first tech college that's really embraced that on a full scale. We're rolling it out campus-wide because we can do it now. We want to provide the same online education. That right now would require access to our network, because while the students have the curriculum, so much of what's embedded in the curriculum has to be accessed externally, right? That's the best practice. So we've got the curriculum, we've even got the textbooks on those tablets, but we aren't maximizing the full capability, the full capacity of online learning until we overcome that. And I will volunteer personally to work through that if we can help find a solution to that, because I think that's our biggest limiter, and we could serve so many more students. That's how we're trying to do it at Davis Tech, because we both know how hard it is to get a new building, right? So we've got to grow without new buildings. And so I see that as our next frontier to tackle. That 3rd piece is the biggest piece.
Okay, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, we will come back to the financial part of this, and let's go right to item number 5 and talk specifically about the space, facility, technology, student advisors and support. Let's talk a little bit more about logistics while we're on this topic.
We got Chris Watson, who's going to have to leave in a few minutes. Did you guys have comments on?
Yes, I did, really briefly. So 1,000 apologies. I actually do have to go down to the prison to teach. So I've got to go. I had a couple of, yeah, right.
So a couple of quick comments on the bachelor degree section of this document. To my mind, there's a section or a bullet point, target audience, for students who have completed a transferable associate's degree or lower division coursework prior to or during incarceration. And so in my experience, I've taught any number of David's Slick students, and I love the 2+2 model, and I'm really, really eager to get a bunch of those students into the UPEP bachelor's degree program. I've also taught a number of students who didn't go to Slick, who I'm also eager to get in the UPEP bachelor's degree program. So that seems to me to be kind of overly prescriptive, unnecessarily limiting. It seems to me the most important elements are, do they meet the institution program admissions requirements? And do they have interest in and aptitude for the occupations associated with the bachelor's degree program, in the kind of spirit of making education on the inside look like education on the outside as much as you can. That's what matters the most to me. So I kind of support a change in language and potentially kind of tone there. Same thing for the third bullet point, general education in lower division. So it says it should be provided by a community college. I think it absolutely can be. That's great. The 2+2 model again is terrific. To the extent that we create a bachelor's degree program and admit people from the beginning, I think you've got the University of Utah, you've got BYU behind that program. I think those are sort of admissions decisions that are probably best made by UPEP. And then, you know, as a history professor, like, you know, what I'm going to say about high yield degrees. I'm as on board as anybody else for kind of occupational training and so forth. But I've been struck kind of recently, I pay a fair amount of attention to Taylor Randall at the University of Utah. And we just had an extravaganza at my institution, BYU, yesterday, where we talked a lot about what undergraduate education is and isn't. The inauguration of our new president, I've jokingly been calling that a coronation a lot, so I'm glad But one of the things that kind of struck me about that day, and I'm not suggesting that UPEP followed the BYU model in any sense, but there was very little discussion of kind of operationalizing bachelor's degree education in the service of high yield occupations. It was in the service of society and personal transformation, a whole set of other issues. And I think that's what the University of Utah's kind of rhetoric minimally is about too. And so I would love to see the language associated with these programs in some sense. Well, obviously it has to connect to occupational concerns, but it's also true that I think the broader culture of this state, I mean, I'm born and raised here, you know, in my entire life. But one of the great things about the broader culture of this state is that it does, in various ways, invest in personal transformation. I'd love to see that kind of reflected a little more in the language associated with that growth.
You know, I really appreciate that. I think the key for me, you know, we're seeing all this, is the academic advisors. That is where, is sitting down with them. If they have 3 years, and they have that interest of, you know what, I want to pursue that. If I'm not sure what I want to do, or I'm much more inclined to a tech thing that can help me get back to my feet as soon as I get out, or hey, I'm in 9 years and I want to educate myself. I have opportunities. Where am I interested in the most, right? So I think that key is with the academic advisors of what their interest and their capacity is. I do know some of the more recent legislative change and directive for USHE to direct the tech colleges and the degree granting institutions is to say, if the tech college can service the same class, we want them to do that. That's only if it's accredited, right, for those things. Because I just had this conversation last week with one of the institutions saying, we're gonna have the tech classes, the tech college teach that now. And I said, well, but does that transfer to the university? Do they know that, right? Because if they're taking it to have it cheaper or taking it to be more proficient from the tech colleges, that is a different question than am I getting university credit? Or is that a good stepping stone before I take a university credit class, right? So I think the key here is having the academic advisors parallel what the academic advisors do on the outside, which is where are you most suited? And I think those, since you represent one of the bachelor degree granting institutions, I think for those who are more inclined and ready for that type of learning, could have those two options for what they're interested in. And I think for that reason, that is where we need some direct, in my opinion, for the bachelor's degrees, there should be a pretty standard, here's something you could easily do without any problems in the correctional facilities, doing it online or through classes. If you're interested in something else, it is by application only to figure out with you or with BYU, how do I access that specialty course and degree while I'm here, just because we can't offer everything in corrections. And so I think the academic advisors are the key. I think identifying some that could be offered across the board, in person or online, and then beyond that for a bachelor's degree by application that you could help facilitate those other specialty classes on an as needed basis, if it was available, because some are not going to be possible to do while you're in the correctional facility.
Yeah, I guess I would argue that, and I really do have to go, but I guess I would argue that I think it's important that for bachelor's degree programs, that there's sort of two important components. One is, of course, can we get a cohort of students who are willing and able to do this? And I think we can, on the basis of my experience. I think we're ready to go. The other is, do we have the capacity of the facility? And one of the nice things about my particular field is that we're a relatively cheap date in terms of facilities, right? I don't need an MRI machine, I don't need laboratories, I don't need Bunsen burners, I just need books, and that's about it, right? So I think it makes the most sense to build specific programs. You can't be all things to all people, and we're not going to operate on like some kind of Oxford, Cambridge tutorial model that's just inefficient. And I do think between the University of Utah and BYU, you've got enough faculty energy. We have more people coming online to both institutions, faculty members, like really good ones, all the time. So I think that momentum is built to the point where we will be able to engage people in a way that is feasible, that does not require massive investments in buildings and so on and so forth, but that can produce really strong degrees that represent a personal accomplishment that employers of various kinds will recognize.
Yeah, I would just weigh in from my personal experience.
Thank you so much, Christopher.
I worked at the UCF print shop and sign shop for years, and that's the job I got when I got out while I went to school. But I ended up getting a tech degree and I worked in digital marketing. So it wasn't the degree that got me the job, it was the confidence in doing the degree that made me feel comfortable taking on bigger challenges. So I would just say, like, I didn't want to nitpick. I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't feel like that wasn't maybe necessarily the right outline. But if there's not an aspirational element to this, that the degree is going to transform you, then we're stuck with some kind of building some kind of degree mill that's just trying to pump people into jobs that, what do they do when the job doesn't work out? So giving people the confidence, the belief that they can take on or do all the things that they can be to be happy and successful, I think is the most important part of the education, as well as being able to demonstrate to employers, I showed up, I can do this, I can do it.
So I do want to go to the number 5, but I do want to say, I think when you have a better idea of how many are in that educational window, that will help a lot for this group to know how to help meet the numbers of those students.
So who's ready and able?
Yeah.
If I could just anecdotally add, David and Chris, please correct me if you're seeing something differently. But what we've seen I would say in the past year that I've been there, is we have a larger group of individuals who are interested in additional education. But it's not that the opportunity isn't there, it's that their ability isn't that's what was eye-opening to us is not that SWIC has too many students trying to get in and they can't meet all their needs. It's that they have too many people who want to access what they're offering, but actually aren't able to yet, not because of UDC's limitations or SWIC's limitations, but they're just not academically there yet. So we're having to take a step backwards, kind of what we were discussing, and say, okay, we need to prepare these people to eventually be ready to access these resources that Davis Tech and stuff has to offer, to prepare that next generation of students. And that's literacy and math resources that I would say we need a big help.
It's almost appealing to have Gunnison focus on adult education, right, for GEDs. They're already good at that. And instead of having both locations try to be a master at everything, there is something to be able to, and I know programming is another question, but there is something that would be very beneficial for education and for cost and for space. For you identify, are there people in Gunnison who really should be up here? Are there people at Draper that really, can we be masters at getting their GED, right? What do you think about that?
Actually, Beaver is probably one of the, right now, Beaver County Jail probably actually awards the most high school diplomas. And incarcerated students get many more high school diplomas than GEDs. We don't test for GEDs nearly as much as high school diplomas. And I think that's positive in the sense of it does take more time. But when you're talking about making sure that they have the skills that they need to go on, what we see is that a high school diploma takes more time to get, and it allows them time to develop the skills that's needed to move on to post-secondary, where when we're talking about students not having the access to the skills. Now we want to make GEDs available for those who have the skills already and can move quickly, right? So it's not, I'm not saying this, but I think the high school diploma needs to still be an option and not taken away or detracted from. But anyway, Beaver actually does a lot more high school diplomas at this moment, not traditionally in the past, but at this moment then.
So that would be great for Gunnison to figure out what they're doing well to implement that.
Yeah, and some of that's just COVID and transfer of personnel and some, stuff that can be figured out, and it'll increase and grow again, but yeah.
Do you have some specific slides, or what do you have in mind for number 5?
Number 5, can I do 4 or skip 5? I don't, for 5, we were just gonna have the institutions, or, we were gonna have.
Which we're kind of doing right now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Dan was gonna bring us up to speed on some of the things that, some of the needs of the technical education institution. Talk about. So if you'd like, we can just go ahead and talk about those.
You're almost as handsome as Dan.
No, I'm not. And Dan,
Dan did
before
give
you
me
this
a,
out, I'm not
Dan
Dan
gave me a
Stanton. Dan's got COVID. He's very sick.
and Dan gave me a sheet.
There you
So,
go.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Here's your Dan.
Okay, let me just pull up the notes here. And, okay.
As you're pulling those up, may I make a comment on Christopher's
Yeah.
observation really quickly? It's the same message that I have sung as well, perhaps because I'm a historian. But I think there's a very practical way to approach this. The Department of Education has put together its requirements and its standards that institutions must adhere to in order to enter into the prison and qualify as a prison education program. And they're going to use terms like, if we go look at what they say, they're going to use terms like high yield degree and those things. So my suggestion would be, although philosophically I'm on the same board as Christopher, that we just simply, in our proposal, that we adopt whatever language the Department of Ed is using for that, because we will all have to answer and adhere to that anyway. So if we're just saying, oh, we're gonna just do humanities, and we're gonna do all these great things and accomplish it because we want to transform, and I philosophically say, raw, let's do it. If we cannot do it because we cannot qualify with the Department of Education, then it seems like it's kind of a waste anyway. So that would be my practical advice in terms of the proposal.
Maybe a quick follow-up to the high yield issue. We talk about, it's very apparent that there's a tight connection between a welding program and certificate into a welding job. It's not so clear that a history major is going to go to this job in particular. But what we do know is that out of all the history graduates in that zip code, they have been found to have gone to jobs in these industries. It might be different industries, they all learned something from what they did. That makes it up. That in the write-up here, we're suggesting that that would be the definition of high yield in that situation where there's not a direct.
Wonderful. In our initial conversations, we were talking a lot about emphasizing the STEM programs, and we mentioned some of the challenges that we face with that. But, I, again, I'm not disagreeing with Christopher at all. It's the same message I've been singing. It's all about transformation. And I strongly believe that happens in an associate's degree in anthropology or whatever it is. I'm just saying that we should be sensitive to the language there. And I agree with you, certainly. That's one wonderful way to look at it. It's high yield if they have history degrees, but they're going on and being successful.
Some history graduates could become tech college presidents.
And I have to say, it's also what they are gifted at.
Yes.
Some are terrible at math and science, but they are so gifted in writing. They're so gifted in other areas. So being able to identify where they're, because whenever there's a disability, there's always a gift. And identify how to help them be successful, because a tech certificate and being hands-on is not for everybody, but other ones are. So I think that's why the academic advisors are so crucial to helping to identify that, because somebody may not ever be able to reach the math standards, but they're very capable of doing something else. So that's something that we also want to think about of being able to help them be successful without having them have to meet every need, you know, that's just the nature of it.
Where does training on like soft skills come into play? Like, is that something that the prison is responsible for, or that you get?
We do.
Social skills.
Yeah, I mean, we,
Interviewing,
UCI used to be their domain. I think they're still interested in part offering that. We also have sort of invested in EBSCOhost to do some of those soft skill trainings on the tablets. So there's there's a couple of different approaches to that, but I think that, to your point, those are critical, right?
I would want to see like a mentorship program where like people that have like gotten out and been successful can go in and tell people what they need to do.
Right, and we have
student
just
advisors.
we've hired 3 peer support specialists, 2 of the 3 that we've been given authority. So we are moving in that direction, and we're also, I mean, not officially in our policy, but looking at how we might leverage some of our inmates to do some more peer support on the inside and help teach some classes and things like that, right? Like, we have to modify our policy, but we're having at least conversations about, you know, how do we make the most of the people that we have and do the most good with those people.
It's the one benefit of having somebody who's in there for 20 years is that they can teach and help other people.
If they've had the opportunity to do those things up front,
Yeah.
so that they can have the rest of their time productive instead of waiting for their turn just because there's not a seat.
Right.
Just because right now, it has been in the past, that the priority is given to those just about to get out, which means whether you have an extra 3 years or an extra 5 years or an extra 10 years, you're waiting your time because you're not just about ready to get out.
And that's why I was saying that the danger of the rhetoric on it being just getting people to jobs is that that's what is happening. So you just want to put people in there who are going to go through because they're about to get out because they're getting a job. And while I do agree with that in general, that has I saw the same firsthand how many limitations are with that, because people that don't really want to do it, but they're getting out in 6 months, so they're just going to go do it, right? Or they're going to get the 4-month time cut, that kind of thing. So.
And they should be able, we can talk about this, but they should be able to get it sooner so that they can be a TA for 3 years, right? Whatever, so they're repeating that information and they're being a mentor and they're getting paid. And I mean, there's a lot of benefit to any and all of that.
Yeah, and I think we appreciate, thanks also to your legislation, that we want to educate people as early as possible, right? We're on board with that. And I also want to acknowledge that things like welding and stuff, do have a sort of need to stay up to date, right? So if you've done it 20 years ago and you get out, your welding certificate isn't going to get you a job. So I think we have to be sensitive to the specific class that they're teaching and whether those skills will be readily applied when they exit, right? And I think for general education, high school diplomas, higher ed, associate bachelor's, those should be offered at any time, right? As early as possible. And we should, like, it reduces risk and it also probably makes them more productive and safer inside the institution. So I think the benefits are clear.
Okay, so do you have anything else on this part you wanted to bring up specifically? Oh, you have your slide from Dan.
No, just some notes here. So the request was to have them talk about what are the needs, what are the resources they have, and what are the needs in terms of space and facilities, technology, student advisors, and support. And so just briefly, so between Davis Tech and UNA Basin and Snow, just some of the notes. Current space allows for all programs. I think President Brushy just talked about that. He talked about the HVAC program space. I don't know if we talked about the concept that is being explored of rotating programs between the men and the women to allow more programming reach with the limited space you have. That's one concept.
Yeah, that won't mention more graduates, but it would give opportunity to both men and women in there.
Yeah. They would like to see the creation of a centralized technical education buildings that could serve both men and the women. That would help to facilitate that. Currently, they're at 90% capacity there. I think we had a similar report from UNA Basin. They have, where Snow College had space for plenty, and they typically have 17. So on average at a time. Technology, Davis uses the tablet program to its fullest potential. All programs have published their textbooks. I understand they've got Canvas working now.
Which is actually a really big deal. So just pause and acknowledge that.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And they're able to complete a small amount of classwork on the tablets because they're not internet enabled, but I guess that's the part that's being worked on, right? All classrooms are outfitted with appropriate computers and technology relevant to the program. About 1/3, Davis Tech and Corrections are approximately 1/3 of the way through installing internet in all of the instructional areas, the technical education areas. And when that's finished, they're thinking about 80 additional computers could be brought online for student use. And they talk about potentially sharing resources with other institutions as scheduling permits. But being aware that that could create a situation requiring upgraded equipment to handle additional capacity. On advisors, Davis Tech and Dan observed that they employ one on-site part-time student services person and a full-time on-site director. They both handle recruitment and enrollment for Davis Tech. The restitution of Pell would require an additional full-time individual. Right now, you can't do Pell the way you're funded, so that would require.
Yeah, no, that's intensive.
And additional student advising would require their current part-time student services person to be full-time. The recommendation from UNA Basin, where they have, I think, capacity of 20 or 30 at a time, with regard to advisement, is the advisement needs to happen before they get to there. A lot of what they're getting is word of mouth when they decide to enroll in their construction program. And so their recommendation is let's get the corrections counselors up to speed on this kind of triage and advisement, so they can at least steer them in a direction and help them be aware of things. So that's the report from the technical institutions. Do you have some more that you'd like to talk about?
Sure, yeah, we'll be brief because actually we're the victims of our own success. We are doing so well. really thrilled. I would share that I think that since last year that, I don't know, we're seeing some of the dust settling. Best way to describe it, from the transition to the new facility. We've seen Brian come on and help remove significant obstacles. Andrea has been significantly influential in what she's done in all of the programming, in particular education. I don't say this lightly. We made tremendous progress. I'm excited about it. We have about 250 registered students this fall inside prison taking college courses. We are running 26 classes this semester, which is a massive load. Brian has helped us open up the Green facility, which is a treatment center. And we have established students that are now returning and accessing education in general population, which was a problem. To the extent I still, of course, before I retire from this position or move to a different sphere, I hope that we can get housing for education. It's not as problematic as it is now. We are not seeing the transfers, and in fact, corrections has been very helpful in getting our people back when somebody slips through the cracks. It's not what it was. That has been a tremendous growth, and I think, you know, we recognize that it needs to be acknowledged, amongst other things. It's been exciting to see next semesters. Therefore, we will have, Brian's estimates are a little bit, I guess he likes to be conservative, but I think Chris and I, Brian's more thinking of another 50, which would take us about 300 with Green and the establishment. I think we're looking probably closer to 75 or 100. But we'll see what happens. That's a tremendous amount of growth, and it's very exciting. We had our first graduation ceremony, but already this year we are on track to have 20 graduates with associate degrees this coming for the next graduation ceremony, and basically equal amount of students finishing academic certificates. So our graduation ceremony next year is going to be massive. It's going to be huge. I think our biggest need right now really is to be able to provide computer access to our students so that they can type up their papers, so that they can have tutoring access in the education buildings during the week. And actually, we just had a meeting, Brian and I and Chris, with Sergeant, yesterday, where we addressed this and are making good progress. I think that the clearance should be available for students to come down and receive tutoring by next week. And we have talked with Brian about hiring, actually using the FOSSAs that we're filling out. For some of our students, they can qualify, all of them actually qualify for work study program. So we're able to get money from the federal government. It won't cost SLIC anything. It will not cost corrections anything, but it's all there. And then with that, we can hire established students to come in and set up the computers so that students can type during the evening and provide tutoring for them. Also, they'll be able to help, facilitate the classroom attendance, keeping track of things like that to make sure that if we do lose a student, that we're on it very quickly. So Brian's already talked about it, but let's go ahead and do that and move that forward. So it's really just the logistics on that we're looking at. Two things that I would bring up. Number one, as we move forward, and you and other institutions as well that come into this area to teach, we are going to have to abide by the accreditation requirements to be a prison education program. And those haven't yet been fully established. They're still we're going to go to the conference on it next month, but we're learning a lot, but in essence, we're going to have greater equity. We're going to need to have some type of equity between what transpires on our mainstream campuses versus what's happening in the prison. And we are not there yet. For instance, one of the things that we will need to put into place is a disability resource center. We have to have that for students to maintain academic accreditation. So one of the things that we will have to consider, I don't know, maybe USHE would provide something like that, because it would make more sense to me to have a resource center such as that would facilitate all of the institutions rather than having every institution create some disability resource. I throw that out there as to types of things that we should explore and put our effort behind, because it's going to become an issue for every institution sooner rather than later. So there is that. And then I would say another challenge that we face that I see is, my goodness, there's a mental health crisis in this country, as we know. And no institution that I'm aware of has felt that as deeply and profoundly as the Department of Corrections. To try and facilitate and provide consistent therapy in that environment is such a significant challenge. And because that therapy is state mandated, it trumps education, it trumps our program and whatnot. Well, because of the challenges in facilitating therapy, insurmountable problems, inmates were not receiving some of the treatment that they needed. And so corrections in the meantime used Davis Tech, they used SLIC to kind of fill in and step in and provide something for these individuals to go through so that they wouldn't just be sitting around and waiting without doing something. Well, now that those treatments, those necessary treatments are coming back in, well, now we have these prisoners that are established in our programs, and all of a sudden then sex addiction opens up. And so now mid-semester they will leave, or whatever what's going with Davis Tech. I have to be honest. I understand the importance of therapy. I truly do. I truly do. And yet, if we just look at the statistics as what is really going to transform people more than anything else, that when they leave here, it's very clear it's going to be in Davis Tech's program. It's going to be earning a college associate's degree. That is going to be more transformative than the therapy if we just look at the statistics. So the fact that I just think that that's problematic that they're, and I'm not saying it should be either. We can do both, I would think. But to automatically have those treatment programs trump and eradicate our students from what they're doing, I think that's a concern that we should look at and address. So mainly I want to talk about how incredible things are going. And then those are just the two things that I would see. Crystal, did you have anything else to add? So thank you guys so much.
David, I love your perspective. My wish list, and I'm not in there like all of you are in every capacity. My wish list would be, and from what I've heard from other correctional facilities in other states, is that any inmate can do all at the same time: programming, education, and work. And that's real life when they get out. They have to know how to still get their counseling and their programming and work on their job or their education and work along the way. I heard of 2 correctional facilities that require work from every inmate all the time. What happens is it gives them that sense of accomplishment, that sense of I can learn how to be self-sufficient in my finances, right? That I'm earning my way. But that's my dream. That's my dream list that you've heard me for a while, right? But I think the opportunities, as we mentioned, of some of the programming, not always being in a seat for 24/7, but perhaps having, some of the other institutions. I know USU was wanting specifically to help you to have some of that treatment be through some of the classes and coursework that they offer, that they could do on their own time or in the evening or in an online class or whatever it is, like the fatherhood class or, there's a lot of options to consider. How do we change the restrictions that 24/7 programming give us, right?
Is there an option to change some of the programs so it isn't done all one way kind of thing?
I just have to say right now, when you go from different facilities or to jails, there's not articulation, and I know the new director is wanting to work on that. So that's where my plea is: if you're working on an articulation process, if you get moved or if you're in the process of one facility or another, how can you make that more amenable to life? To having your whole thought process change because you're thinking now a different way and you're paying for your own commissary and you're learning how, you're getting your programming, but you're looking at your whole self to make this transformation instead of trying to make the transformation just through the programming. It's a philosophy change, but I think there's a lot of options for consideration right now. And I think the seat availability causes a problem. That they're waiting for one thing or another. And so if we can, that's where I think about instead of what are we doing now, where do we want to be? That's my wish list, is that the programming for sex offender or drug treatment, whatever the programming is, has some kind of flexibility, and a hybrid like we have in real life of options, is really helped, in my mind, is helping them the most figure out how to live in the real world and manage your time and manage your finances and manage your change of thought. So that's our philosophical conversation that we're having today, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we should go to the financial side of paying for all of this. I think is an important part of getting your input. We can give a quick skeleton of where we're at and then get some input from all of you.
All right, just to show where we are now. I need some coaching learning. I'd like to do this slideshow.
We're showing you everything. I think you just have to change what you're seeing or you're doing it right now.
Yeah, this is slides, but
No, up in the red.
okay, there we go. That's there we go. Okay, and start from the current slide. Here we go. Thank you. So this is what we currently look like as reported by the institutions. We have essentially two different ways that programs, higher education programs are funded through state resources. Now, I might add that there's a third way, and that is private resources, institutional resources that are not from the state. There's a lot of that going on that the Prison Education Project is bringing to bear on this. But to start with the state resources, the technical education programs provided Davis, Snow, and SLIC, Davis, Snow, and UNA Basin are under contract with the Department of Corrections. Corrections pays 100% of the program. It's a little different from the main campus programs where you have a budget and you charge the students tuition, and tuition goes to the institution as a dedicated credit to help pay for this. In this case, under the contract, Corrections pays 100% of the program delivery. They have discretion for the program, the budget, and access. And the funding comes from the prison telephone surcharge account. But maybe we'll just give some of the detail on that at this point and come back to it as needed. As far as tuition, it's determined, collected, and managed by Corrections. The statute indicates that 50% of the tuition is required at the time of enrollment. It doesn't address the remaining tuition, so I don't know if that means they don't pay 100% tuition or if the other 50% gets added in later.
It's deferred usually to when you parole, get a bond.
So it does become 100%.
Well, the remaining, yeah.
Except in HB 194, that passed, I required that Corrections help at the time of registration, that they apply for every scholarship and Pell Grant and everything available, and have help to do that, which is what we hope to do. Just because it's not possible, it's just impossible for inmates to do that.
We know our population is impecunious and that their likelihood of getting out and repaying, and we don't have a mechanism to really capture that funding anyway, so I know
That's
that.
collections job, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yes,
According
which
to
is
collection.
problematic in itself.
Yeah, so I think think our goal is in alignment with yours, which is to make sure that we give them every opportunity to get an education without a huge burden of cost, right? Because we know they have other needs and they make very, like, the average pay is 90 cents an hour, right? They're not paying for.
So the long and short of it is that you may or may not be recouping what normally would be collected in terms of tuition. So let's go to the second model, which is what Salt Lake Community College is doing. You received an appropriation in the 2017 session for fiscal year 18 of 300 and I'm not going to get the number exactly, $312,000 ongoing. It was transferred from corrections to Salt Lake Community College. And I believe that Tim Sheehan would probably clarify that my understanding is that that was a new appropriation the year before for the same purpose, but went to corrections. I don't know all the details of that. But that being said, where we are now, Salt Lake Community College is currently spending $617,000 on their correctional education program. About 360, I think the details are in your handout. Maybe a little off on that. About 360 of that is, well, it all comes into the institution's E&G budget, the education and general fund budget as a line item by the legislature. And SLIC has taken that original 312 and from year to year, they will add onto it from their E&G budget for compensation increases and other things that are funded for the general institution. So it's up to about 363. That currently is being used per Salt Lake Community College's discretion to pay for, well, I'll just go through the bullets here. That's probably easier. So Salt Lake Community College pays 100% of the program delivery and support. The college has program and budget discretion. Corrections, of course, has access discretion. It's funded from, as I was describing, Salt Lake Community College's prison education fund, which comes out of their full E&G fund. As far as tuition, that's determined and collected and managed by the institution and presumably consistent with regular students. However, they have set aside $175,000. I don't know if that's a set aside or if that was actually used on what the report was. But $175,000 was used for scholarships for the students so that they would not have to pay tuition. You had some that had access to Pell on the second chance Pell.
Yeah, about moving forward in our work with the financial aid office at SLIC and also with the folks at Mira Justice, we're confident that we will be able to have about at least 90% of our students accessing Pell. Yeah.
Did you say 90?
We're not quite there.
Did you say 90, David?
90, yes, 90%. Now it's there. We're not quite there yet. There still are. We still have. It's hard, man. It is hard to process that Pell for hundreds of students in that prison environment and get that in. It is. As Chris can attest, it is a difficult task.
You know what, Dr. Bach was talking about that. Do you mind if we go back to the last slide?
Yeah, I was going back to that.
Okay.
The bottom of the bullet says that you're not Pell eligible because corrections is providing the program and funding the program.
Right.
And they're not a Pell eligible institution. They're not collecting tuition.
Yeah, so cutting to the chase, that was very helpful, David, thank you. If you look at, we've got 1.9 million in the contract, right? So there are economies of scale in that contract that are going to allow us to cover the HVAC program without an increase, right? So, but what that 1.9 does not cover is what you've talked about. So if we could take that part-time advisor to a full-time advisor, if we could, to your point, Dr. Bakaboy, it's intensive, the financial aid works. We can add a financial aid specialist, embed in our financial aid team. And then the other thought I have, we also don't have, by the way, in the contract, we don't have an equipment portion of the budget. No, we have the appropriations on the tech ed side. It'd be nice to have something to refresh equipment too. But I also given some thought to, we did some modeling based on 50% eligibility for Pell. And if we did that, and we had a version of the UTech scholarship, the Tech Ed scholarship, that the institution, all the institutions already get for the high yield awards, we could use that to compensate for the rest. And I'll commit to raising money, and I think that we can raise money and bring more to the table. But if we did that, our back of the napkin is you'd add 430 for that half position, the other positions, a couple $100,000 for the Tech Ed scholarship, and maybe 75,000 ongoing for equipment would probably meet the need. So if you add 430 to that 1.9, that'd take us to about 2.35. I think that would get us where we're talking about.
Does that include tuition that you would collect either from Pell or from whatever source it would come from?
Well, that's what it would cover. So there's not going to be, there's no mechanism to, other than what I just discussed, to collect tuition, right? Because we want to get away from the promissory notes. They're driving us all crazy, and they're a waste of time. So that would cover all of it, Jared. Yeah, and that is really soft. We don't know about Pell eligibility. We've not been in that world. You guys have let out. You're very. I mean, that's very exciting about where you think we can go. That could go down, but it'd be nice. I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be nice to wrap this into the appropriation request, to have the scholarship component into it after we do our best to get them Pell eligible?
So that brings us to the last slide, which is what do we suggest or what do you consider? And that is, we look at a direct institution appropriation. All the community colleges already got an appropriation. We might look at how they perhaps get packaged together in a single package. Right now it's split between your 390,000 budget or whatever the number is, and an additional amount that comes in from the adjunct faculty funds and your instructional piece.
I think that's a tremendous suggestion. I felt that for quite a while. If we could see Davis taking advantage of our restitution, there are so many benefits, I think, that would come from that. And I mentioned the Vera Institute of Justice that is there. That actually, when the representative was out here, he was actually strongly encouraging Davis Tech to consider that moving forward. And since we've been working at it for a while, institution, we would very much like to help iron out the kinks and work that through that process to see that you're successful.
Yeah. So it could be done just through a line item on an appropriations bill transfer. Probably isn't entirely as simple as that. There might be some other legislative pieces related to the telephone surcharge account that need to be addressed. Right now it says the funds shall be used by the department. Well, maybe this constitutes being used by the department for education of incarcerated individuals if the institution is doing for that. But those are things that need to be looked at, and I think there might be some more work that needs to be done if we decide to go this route with this plan. What's the research?
I totally love this on the condition of two things. One of them is to have a process for the inmates. They get their first class, through, but then there's some kind of requirement for them to have some skin in the game, that they be a TA, that they be a peer mentor, that they be a tutor, that they have someone in literacy, whatever it is, which means it's going to take some organization. But I think it's going to help them give confidence as they are helping other people. It's going to take some organization for time and figuring that out. So that's one condition. The second condition is we figure out how to pardon all of those past bonds that are due. And that will have to be some kind of.
It's technically held by, isn't it the Department of Corrections that's still collecting it?
It's not, that's the whole
It's handed
thing.
off to the
Collection.
It does.
You collect it, but it goes to.
We collect the promissory notes, and then when someone is
Just the
released,
note, it's just the note.
it goes to the Department of
So
Collections.
those are my two conditions. That we figure out some kind of mentorship, TA, to pay, and I don't, you can figure out how that's gonna work best, if it's like every other class, they help do something, I don't know. You figure out how, in return for your education, you need to work in the education system and figure that out. I'll let you guys work that out, but we need to figure out how to go back to collections to say, we really are not going to be collecting that anymore, and we're gonna pardon all of those past things. We need to figure out how to do that. Those are my two conditions.
Representative, I think that on that second one, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you can also sell that as a cost saving. Not only is it good public policy, it's a cost saving issue, but if you're not investing the time, that really few people are investing in trying to collect those, you've actually saved money in the long run, because your collection rate is abysmal, right?
That is absolutely accurate.
So, yeah, it's actually,
Very little
that's
funding
a
is
cost saving
related to
initiative.
our surcharge.
And do you even know what the collection rate is? I mean, it's over.
We did have that number. Yeah, because we do, some of that funding is remitted and then
It goes back into-
replenishes the surcharge, we can tell you, but it's such a minuscule amount that we know the mechanism isn't functional.
Also, a really low priority, isn't it?
And the second, the third thing I'm gonna add to that is the option for the inmate or the family to pay it forward. That there be some kind of, what is the,
Open a scholarship program for people like me that can put money back in the system.
yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
that be set up, for family members, inmates to give back. And all the inmates will know about it, they'll be so grateful, some will do it, some will not. But we need to set that up, because my hope is that this will start paying for itself at some point.
It's a phone.
But it really does match.
Perpetual education
I
program.
was just gonna say that, but we could easily have the Gardner Institute do an evaluation of the payback on this, because we may not see the money back into that fund. But what is the value of the reduction in recidivism and the earned wages and the taxes that come out of it, right? So we know our return on investment for anybody that takes hour-longer programs or 900-hour-longer programs, they have an 85% wage increase from when they entered, this is adults, not high school students, to when they exited 4 quarters later. So the economic impact can be measured. And so if we're flexible in the way we think about the return on investment, I think we could show a pretty powerful return on investment.
I mean, I think you absolutely speak to the most powerful reason that we want to educate people while they're incarcerated, which is to get that, recapture that return on investment, to drive down recidivism. We know reincarceration costs are huge to taxpayers, and this is one way we absolutely can be sure by the data that we can reduce those costs. So if we can study formally and give them out, that makes it easier sell.
So would Yushi host that, fund?
Study,
Yeah, would you host that,
all the fun.
the perpetual education fund, that they would have an option? Where would it be your institutions that you, I don't know, how do we do that?
Or the foundation
Or just like, thinking about how a regular school institution have a scholarship fund set up by someone.
Yeah, that's someone who would host that.
Typically receive those funds into the foundation of our institutions.
So to the individual institutions,
However
or,
you want to-
I-
That's the mechanism we have. We wouldn't be able to offer is the foundation of 501c3 offer the college.
yeah, because my only thought is, YouTube, and, we've got YouTube, we've got the U, we've got, I think, is there some way we can figure out how to have a consistent message, a consistent option? Because it may change over the years. We may expand it, or USU has things. I mean, I'm just like, how can we make this more of a unified scholarship fund without making it complicated for
Yeah.
everybody?
That's
what I'm
for
wanting
us to
to
noodle over with our scholarship experts. We've got a team that's-
Awesome. See, I'm thinking that's
And some of them
probably
are-
where it should be, and
Yeah,
then you
some
can
of them are
divvy it out
centrally, some of
somewhere.
them are centrally administered, and some of them are.
Yeah. So I would love those, whatever needs to be in my bill, that it would be added to my bill for these changes. The forgiveness loan, of the loan, whatever it is, I want all those added to my bill.
The tutoring, mentoring thing, a forward.
The tutoring mentoring thing, could be, as directed by, so that there's so
Make
much
those statements.
flexibility. We can mention it, I think that'll go far in the bill. right? But I don't want to put so many strings on it that you're having issues with it. I want so however that needs to be worded.
Well, we'll take it on anyway, because we've already seen the proof of concept and that it's working, so whether it's in the bill or not, we would intend to do that, so.
Yeah.
So just another thought that I'm having as we have this discussion is that we talk about paying it forward or having ability to come in without cost or whatever it might be. Shifting to the model that if you're trying to be consistent with your main institution, you have students already. I mean, people have questions about I'm getting a free education because my Pell is covering my tuition and my costs, so it's free for regular students. Well, the incarcerated students, it seems like, have that same opportunity if they're eligible for Pell or other financial aid.
Yeah, it's no different from a student on the main campus, Jared, so.
And so you may have some in there that they've already got their tuition paid for, but
If you're Pell eligible, you're
students
Pell
get in the
eligible,
game outside.
right, so, but that's why I suggest a model that's, just an appropriation directly that has the same terms as the UTech scholarship or the Tech Ed scholarship. Because it's for us, it's for the high yield awards. These are all high yield programs, right? So we treat them the same as we would a student on campus in terms of the financial aid.
And I can tell you in terms of an institution becoming Pell eligible, becoming an official prison education program, technically, yeah, they are not allowed to treat their incarcerated students any differently than they are now. So we won't really be able to put a limitation or an expectation on an incarcerated student that isn't on a non-incarcerated student. So the skin in the game is the opportunities that education provides, and hopefully they recognize that.
You have work study funds, right, at the main campus?
You spend down those funds, you don't get them later.
You don't get them later.
Is that a mentor thing in the facility? It can be a work study.
Yeah, this is, we'd actually like to implement that with the students who are incarcerated. And we work with Brian to make sure that they are drawing upon those federal money. And it'd be a great job and opportunity for reformation and to give back. So that's what we're working on.
I just want to cry. I mean, honestly, this is something that has been a thorn in the side, a challenge for every inmate, for corrections, for collections, for families. This is really what the hope of this council has wanted to come to, and it's been a long time in the coming, and I'm really excited about that. So I think for now we've got some good things with that. We are almost out of time. I want to quickly do, I'm going to let you summarize at the end with the priorities and recommendations.
Yeah, that can be quick.
Brian, will you talk about your education survey? I mentioned it, but I just want you to have the chance to really talk about how things are going with that.
Sure, this was just, I thought would be useful for the group, and I didn't necessarily intend to go, line by line and discuss it. It was really for our use to see, just get a picture of the student experience. And it obviously wasn't every student. It was, a self-selecting survey that was sent out. What was really eye-opening to us was that, for the most part, at least of the students that responded, they feel that the instruction they are receiving is high quality, meaning that our institutions, community college, Davis Tech, have excellent instructors. Which, I mean, we suspected that already, but it was good validation. In support of your proposal for the academic advisors, it was refreshing, but disheartening to see that a lot of students said, or a lot of potential students said, that they are not accessing education because they weren't exactly sure how to enroll. Not that the opportunity wasn't there, they just, I think because education and the process to enroll in education was in their background, they kind of felt like they didn't know how to do it. We're taking that upon ourselves to train our case managers better, to be able to show them what those opportunities are, but that's where I also think those academic advisors would be very valuable. It was interesting on our end to see the question of which of these items made it hard for you to participate or complete your education program. Unfortunately, the number one reason was that UDC housing staff made it difficult. There's no additional information that went along with that, but we know, as Dr. Buckley mentioned, it's hard to do school inside of a housing section with 65 other individuals who aren't necessarily there to support.
Thank you, President.
And we want to figure out a way to make that work solution. Those are the biggest things I wanted to highlight. Just bring that to the group's attention.
I love the new perspective that all of you are just working so hard together to really understand where are we at, what we want to do. But you can't do that unless you have faith in this information to know how to improve things. And one of my comments about that is, you know, institution, schools and whatever, and sometimes individual schools kind of have a programming metric for time. You have an A and a B day, or you have a certain time of day, you have programming, a certain time of day, you have school, you know, I mean, there's other ways to figure out that is a way that it's never been done here before, that it's worth bringing to the table to say, how can we access, and maybe sometimes twice a day, they may have certain programming, but at least they know, hey, I still have other options of when I can do my peer tutoring and when I can do studying, when I can do, you know, and so just, those are just some of the things that I think are, I love how we're bringing a lot of this together and working together to get these things accomplished. Jared, do you want to talk about where we are forward? And I would like, with my draft legislation, I'd like, actually, we've all seen it. I want you to reach out to me and Jared on the same email if you have other suggestions and things you want to do. But I think we could easily work in the next week or two to get some new language put onto that draft. And send out again, that has to do with the funding, the timing, the new scholarship, you know, perpetual education fund that we can create in here. I think we have a lot to do with that. So do you want to summarize, Jared, with where you are?
On number 6, priorities and recommendations. So one of our responsibilities in the statute as a council is to provide recommendations and a report to a couple of the legislative committees, the Department of Corrections and the Board of Higher Education. So that report comes due in November for the Education Interim Committee. And so our goal is to have our issues decided in our last meeting on October 31st. So what I'm going to propose is that the council members and stakeholders, you would be invited to submit summaries of work that you've done in 2023 that are related to higher education and corrections and the priorities of the council that we could include in that report. So I'll probably reach out and follow up and invite you to do that. You've already turned in some data. I think we're okay with that. But if you have things like we added 3 programs to the women's facility and other things that you want to include in there, we could do that. So let's see if we can have you turn in whatever you would like to have be considered by October 13th. And I'm not sure we introduced Lorraine in the meeting before, but Lorraine is our administrative assistant here who has been had some assignment changes here, and I think we got the best, right?
Absolutely.
So
I'm confident. I can see her flying over there.
Yeah.
It's something right.
And so what I'm going to suggest is that we have you submit those things to Lorraine and copy me on. Lorraine will compile them and I will go through them. So 2 things. One is items to report on. The other is our recommendations. That might be the most important part. So I started with a list of, I think, 6 or 8 things that we have been talking about through the course of this year, some of which we've talked about today, mostly just topics, but we want to turn those into the form of recommendations. And then I think in our October meeting, we may spend a significant portion of our that time discussing some of those. Some we already discussed, so we can move quickly on and just vote on and say, yeah, let's make this recommendation. And some of them we might make some adjustments, but I would ask for you to invite you to look at that. We thought we might take some time in this meeting and put some up on the board, but we don't have to do that today. Turn in any feedback you have on the items listed or any other items that you think we ought to consider. And then let's have a good discussion about those. If you would turn them in a form of, here's a recommendation for corrections or recommendation for Board of Higher Education to do this or do that. That'll spring to talk.
Great. I do want to say we have time for just a public comment if there's anybody online. But I do want to acknowledge our legislative staff, Jeff and Walton, appreciate all his work that he does, and he will be working with me and Jared on putting the language changes together. So I don't see any, oh, we do see it.
Well, that's just my cursor.
That's your cursor, right? So I don't see any comments online, but I want to say thank you to everyone listening online. And this whole group, I mean, the first time we got together, we were not sure which way was up. And a lot has transpired. We've got good people at the table. We still have more work to go, but the track that we're on every time gets us a little closer to help. And I want to acknowledge corrections. I think it's like in the next 2 or 3 months, you've got a job fair coming to the facility. Just describe that and then we'll end.
We're very excited. I wish Darren was still here. This is actually Davis Tech in collaboration with UCI, in collaboration with Department of Workforce Services, joint venture. We have employers who have committed to come into the Salt Lake facility and conduct interviews. We selected candidates who are, right now, I think the category we're doing is 60 to 90 days to release. They will have an interview that day and they can, when they walk out of the gates, have a job waiting for them, which we're ecstatic about.
Yeah. It's so great, and my hope would be some of those employers would offer a scholarship to help them on once they get out. If there's certain classes or certification they need to continue to do, that they would help invest to help them for that completion so that they can take those jobs. So
I've heard that there's a machining employer who is trying to figure out some ways to bring their machines onto the facility.
My understanding is that is completely allowed and we can probably figure out how to accommodate that, so.
And
To do an apprenticeship
hire
program.
or start an apprenticeship while they're in.
Somebody could actually be employed while incarcerated by an outside
Interesting.
employer, and then when they leave, they continue that.
you know, that's hope for tomorrow. That's hope for today, which is what we want to help. The corrections part of correction is to really see how to be contributing members of society. So with that, thank you everyone, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Right on time, right at the end.
There we go.